Hello. Welcome to any combo lords joining me in the beautiful combo classroom today, where today's topic for our live video does include not this thing, which is fun. Ooh, I love these. Technically, I found the name of these is called Hoberman spheres. They have a name. But today's topic is more so board game and card game related again, because I have some new innovations and developments in some of the topics I was chatting about in previous streams. Essentially, I have a very simple board game I've developed that is a similar version of something I mentioned in last stream, but an updated version that I will share. You don't need to have seen the last one to understand this. Of a really simple board game I've tried to create that will try and match a complexity up to the level of chess, which we can't necessarily quantify, but we can quantify as beyond the level that a human or computer can currently solve the strategy of. And I've also made a new development in the thing related to magic cards. As you know, I've been chatting about that type of trading card game called Magic Cards, and I've made a new development in one of my personal challenges about what is the maximum deck you could build that would always win on the first turn. And with that, and of course, in the game, there's enough cards that theoretically they could have a deck that has a strange counterspell effect they can activate even before it's their first turn. There's a few card combinations that could pull that off, like a blue card and Force of Will could pull that off. However, with most of these combinations of things, there is those won't occur most of the time, and we are making a mathematical basis of winning on the first turn, assuming nothing else occurs. And I've made a new development. I've built a deck that I think is larger than anyone who has studied that problem before, which is, because I can't find anyone who's studied the problem before, which is 22 cards. I said I proved 21 cards last time. Well, you know what? We're up to 22 cards. Now, as far as stream goes to begin for chess-related things, because that's sort of a basis for standard board games, let's note that a game like chess, that is a two-person, fully strategic game that doesn't rely on any luck or randomness. You have a setup of the board, and you have a way that two players take turns, have full knowledge of each other's board state, and go back and forth in some fashion, and there is a win condition. Any game of that sort will be guaranteed to be of one of three states. One of three states. Either it will be provable, not necessarily that any human, computer, or even alien could make this proof. Sometimes these proofs could be beyond the scale of the universe in terms of complexity. But for games, there is, of that sort, three categories. A provable under some theoretical computer, first person win, a provable second player win, or a provable either player can force a tie. So, with those known, the goal of a game, if you want to design a chess-like game, let's say our goal is to design something simpler than chess, yet similarly complex. Well, we have to understand that it is provable under some computer. If we don't involve luck or randomness, which then could be, quantified in its own state involving probability by some computer. If we are having a pure strategy game, there is a strategy that will allow either the first player to win, second player to win, or either player to force tie. But some of these are so big of webs of possibility that it's possible there will never be an alien planet that develops a computer that can solve it. Like chess. it's unknown still if chess is at the complexity level to solve chess, as far as proving that the first player has a series of, if you see this, you do that. If you see this, you do that. If you see this, you do that, and etc. A tree of possibilities that make the first player, second player able to win, or make either player able to force a tie. Well, it's unknown if that is too complex for any computer to even store in the physical universe. But that's so far beyond the level of what we need for a game. We can make a game that is somewhere between chess and checkers. Checkers being, we got coins on this one, because I was figuring, as we develop board games, I'm not in the market to sell board games. Sometimes I've had a board game that someone gave me as a gift or something, and I look inside it and I figure, this board game could have been described as text online and as you playing with a very typical type of item, because a lot of board games are variations on classic effects, and there are a few items that most people have in their closets. And I figure most people, somewhere, maybe not most, but the people who would play a board game, most of the people who would play a board game, somewhere in their closet, have a chess/checkers board, have at least a couple dice, somewhere in their house, at least have a couple coins at least, and probably have at least one deck of playing cards. And so I figure, as we develop games, let's make them for the people. Let's make games that are for the masses. Games that you could play with any sort of combination of playing cards, dice, coins, boards, and so on. But we don't necessarily want to use all of those, because we want to make a simple game. So I've always thought that it was a brilliant, deep challenge to try and make a game that was simple rules, yet beyond the complexity that a human or computer could currently solve. Checkers, I believe, could have been solved. Connect 4's been solved. These mean they can prove which player can win under a complicated series of moves. But what about a game we can't solve yet that revolves around very simple things? Well, last time I was presenting a game that involved, you have coins that can flip. And I've decided we are going to call that game I came up with last time Stack Flippers. And we are going to call the new game, that is a simpler, in a way, variation that I'll describe here, Stack Hoppers. So, Stack Flippers. That game I presented last time to represent the rules involved, what if we just had coins as our pieces? Because, say, somebody in their closet has an 8x8 board for chess or checkers, and happens to have enough coins that we can make one player be coin A and one player be coin B. In this case, I'm using pennies versus dimes. Now, pretty much any coin will have two sides. I've made a short about how arguably you could say this has two sides, three sides because of the edge, or I could imagine an argument for an infinite amount of sides, because this is a circular face, that circles are, in a very simplified sense, a polygon with infinite sides. Don't use that in your math thesis. It's not factually true that a circle has infinite sides, but a circle resembles a polygon with approaching infinity sides in many ways. So I could see a strange argument that a coin has an infinite amount of sides if it has a round edge like that. However, dimes, nickels, and things have such random amounts of notches on the edge. I don't know who came up with how many notches are going to be on the edge of one of these. So random. Now, in any case, when looking at this game model, the way I presented the last one was, say these are other pieces somewhere on the board. Say these are my pieces. That heads could move horizontal or vertical. If a thing is tails, it can move diagonal. A thing can move the size of a stack it's in. That's how far it hops. A stack can hop the size of its stack. You can also make a stack by, if I hop onto something that's the same face, it combines. And then I said, if I hop onto something that's a different face of your same piece, it bounces. I am going to add one rule now to the game I presented there, which is that I'm going to say you can bounce another direction. I'm going to say you can bounce another direction that it allows. I think it'll add strategy to say that you don't have to bounce forward, that you could bounce a different direction. Now, one rule I didn't clarify that almost made me think of needing to create this simplified game is, well, okay, we'll get to this in a minute. That'll be the simplified game. Essentially, you can make stacks, and if I want, I don't have to hop the whole stack. I can say I'm hopping 2 of the stack. That would go 2. I could hop 1. I could hop 3. And there were turn phases. I figured maybe one way of interpreting that is that each turn you flip a piece or a stack of yours or the opponent's, or you move. Another way of interpreting it is you flip more often. You flip one of yours or the opponent's, then you move. Then it's their turn. And that typically our rule will be you can't flip one that they flipped in the last turn, because we don't want it to just be a back and forth. So you can't flip one they had flipped in the previous turn. I also figured one way of doing the turn structure, if you want more flips, would be you flip one of yours, then you move, then you flip one of theirs. Now, another one I came up with even after the stream was maybe you flip one of yours, move up to one of yours with a heads on it, move up to one of yours with a tails on it, and then flip one of theirs. So that would, increase the amount that we're moving versus flipping, which could be good. But as I was going through this, I realized perhaps I should even make it simpler, because I was trying to quantify this in a numerical state. I know a lot of you like the math, so I also was trying to figure this out as numbers. And I figured states on the board that have no piece could be quantified as a 0 on a grid. States on the board, however, in this, have sort of 2 ways I could try and put positives versus negatives. You see, I could say per person that I call this 1, because it's a heads, and I call this -3 because it's 3 tails. Like the absolute values, the size makes sense, and I could say per person positive and negative is based on heads or tails. But then what about encoding the other person in the board state? So perhaps I would want to say a different way of encoding heads or tails, and that I'm positives and you're negatives, or whichever player was first was positives, perhaps. Now, I figured maybe we can, if we're trying to do a purely mathematical analysis, perhaps what we can do, let's try and tilt this a bit, because it's hard to see on the camera. We're going to try and tilt it a bit. Okay. That works. Cool. Now, I figured maybe we can make a version of our game that each player only has one way of having it up, and we only need 1 coin. Now, I already thought, with that last game, which we're going to call Stack Flippers. We're going to call that last game Stack Flippers. Now, there are various win conditions and various board intro setups. You can set up the intro board in various ways, and you can also say that the win condition is take all the pieces, or that it's create a stack bigger than the amount your opponent has on the board, or that it's have more pieces in the opponent's back row than they have on the board. Various ways of, making that Stack Flippers work. But now we're going to go to one just called stack hoppers that I invented. Stack hoppers is even simpler than stack flippers. Now also, you want to see a little stack crawler? Look at this little bug. This little bug is crawling right there. You see that little guy? Oh, that guy's cool. Oh, let's put him on a plant. Probably wants to be on a plant. So, here, you want to go on a plant? Uh-oh. I bumped it. You want to go on a plant? Okay, I put it on a plant. Cool. It's on the staghorn fern. See, it's, do you see it on the leaf now? I don't know if you can see it, but it's on that leaf. Alright, anyway, I had to relocate the little inchworm. Anyways, I figured, what if we can make a game that you only need one type of coin for? So, if you have, like, more than, for some board setups, you'd need more than 32 of the coin if you want to fill up both rows per player. Or you could make board setups that you only need, say, 16 of the same coin. Then one player could be heads, one could be tails. Now, the problem with this is that typically, if you make a board setup that pieces can go either horizontal or diagonal, like if I'm heads and you're tails, and heads and tails no longer encodes, can I go horizontal versus vertical diagonal, and any piece can go horizontal or vertical / diagonal, it's harder to make a fun game because you keep a distance from each other, and if I could attack you, you can attack me. But we do have some difference in the rules I've created so far about the ways pieces stack, the ways pieces bounce, and so on. So how are we going to combine these things? Let's say we're doing a variation where each player only has 8 coins in their back row. So that's just one variation. There's a reason why I don't know if this is a working board setup for this simplified stack hoppers game, because you'll see a weird move I can do. But my idea for this is that, what if on a turn you move, let's say I have this, you move what we call a stack. Now a stack doesn't have to be the entire stack that you have on a spot. So I could move all of it, 2 of it, 1 of it, I could move any portion of a stack that's there. The amount I move, I hop. Now, before we said if I land on one of a different orientation, oh, these all have to be tails. If I land on one of a different orientation, I bounce. And if I land on one of the same orientation, I stick. But what if we say that when you land on one of your own, you can choose to what degree you stick and bounce. Now, this actually is simpler in the rules to encode than it may sound. What we say is that when I land on a piece here, I get to move again, but I have to move from there. And if I don't want to bounce and I want to stick, then the amount I'm hopping is a stack size 0. So I can hop a stack size 0 off that at that point if I want to stay there, meaning when you land on yourself, you do have to hop again, but you can pick 0. So then if I want to hop, I can hop from any amount from that stack that I've currently created. Now, the way that this will avoid that strategy of just, I can't be that close to you and you're that close to me, is you have to create almost a little web of your pieces to hop and bounce off in the right fashion. And if you hop and bounce off in the wrong fashion, you could leave a little web for them to capture. Now, I even considered perhaps when you capture a piece, you get to bounce as well. So that's still in something that we may test out today, whether you get to bounce to any degree even when you capture a piece. Now, that would be in a rule called the regeneration style or something, because I imagine if you're able to capture pieces by bouncing, then you also may have to match that, a move where instead of moving a piece, you get to regenerate a dead piece on your back row. But you can't regenerate a whole pile that got captured. You only get to regenerate one of them. Now, here in any case, the reason why this last board setup might not work to have them all in the back row for that style of game is that I could go hop, now it's 2, and I go again, hop, wait, now it's 3, yeah, and then hop. Now it's 4. That might actually work. That might be okay. We might be able to make that work because it can't target the back row. I was thinking for some reason it would land all the way on the end. So if player 1 started with that, it's really targeting that spot, but this player could do the same. So they would go hop, hop, hop. And in fact, you could have gone one more because there that was assuming I left at 0. I could have gone from here a lot of different places if I wanted to scatter some. So I could have also gone like 2 of them hop off that way for my turn. And they could have gone like 2 of them hop off that way for that turn. So then you have to sort of create a whole web. Like I could go, I hop here and I bounce. They could go like, I hop here, I bounce off with 2. And I bounce off with 3 and I capture you. But that's a bad move because I can go 1 and capture them. And I got 3 and they only got 2. So, you know, if you have a big stack, it has more powers. But it's also more vulnerable to, if it gets caught, you lose a lot of pieces. Now, I don't want to get to the type of game where in the end game, if one player has more pieces, it's obvious they'll win, and it's boring for the other player. So I was even considering either having a regeneration style effect, that if I had the regeneration style effect, like I said, I would probably also have you can bounce off opponents' pieces to match that you can easier kill more than 1 per turn to match the fact they could regenerate 1 on some turns. But also I was considering with these, a lot of different fun variations. And in general, we're calling this one stack hoppers, where I think this type of piece is a very interesting piece to study in game theory. We could study this on tiny boards, like 3x3 boards, that maybe we could prove which side wins, first player or second player. And we can encode this one with positive and negative numbers. We can just say the amount of heads, we're going to say heads is player 1, tails is player 2. And that, because here they can go either diagonal or horizontal vertical. They can go the amount that is in the stack, but you don't have to use the whole stack if you don't want. And they can sort of re-go if they bounce off themselves. But they can reaccumulate if they ever want to, like, choose how much they take off that. But the amount that you reaccumulate, you always just bounce the amount of the stack that you're moving. Now, with these simple rules, we can encode it as just positive. That's positive 2 if I have 2 heads. Positive 1, that's 0 if there's nothing. These are negative 1s. This would be a negative 3 if I have 3 of them right there. And then we say player 1 is always positive heads, and that you're not, sort of like how white always goes first in chess, but then you decide who is white. We could say, you know, positives and heads are always first, but you decide who is that. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to study here. We could turn it almost into, if we want to see a 1-player possible amount of paths of sprouting, if it was a bigger board, for example, we could turn it into a cellular automata, sort of reminiscent of the game of life or something like that. But it's very complicated to map the web of moves here. Like my goal, I think I've reached some good amounts of complexity per simplicity. Now, it might have sounded complex when I described it, but I believe that I could phrase all these rules within a single page, and that it would be a quite complex game. Now, that's a little opposed to some older games I developed. Like, we might look a little further at the rules of this old game I developed when I was like 12 or something with my friend Jordan called Azundo. Now, in one of these chess game board things, I have not only the original Azundo pieces that were made by taping things to Legos. These are 2x2 Lego pieces that we taped what the piece was on it, with these each meaning different things. But also the upgraded ones that me and my friend made on these blocks. And this game, Azundo, is an interesting lesson in game theory, because I developed a game as a child, and it was a fun game. It didn't have any major flaws, and there were certain things done right about it. But it did not meet the test of what I'm currently working toward, which is that it was beyond the complexity that a human or computer could probably currently solve, but it wasn't simple. The rules here, we can look at the rules of what the different pieces did in a bit to see how I tried to make it different than chess, but how it's a little more complicated than possibly necessary. And the goal of a game should sometimes be simplicity. I think too many game designers aim to make everything almost as complicated as possible. Now, of course, in something like a video game where you're not... Oh, the squirrel is right there. It is so quiet and cool and nice that it's been right there. I didn't even notice it was right there. Oh my God. Okay. That's my friend. That's my friend. Well, according to the neighbor, there's like a lot of them. Could be at least a dozen of those squirrels, but I hope you saw that. I hope I got that angle. It ate it right out of my hands. So I hope you guys saw that. Yes, the squirrels are becoming quite my friends. I've been stacking some secret clips of them that in the past I've been putting the squirrel clips in the episodes. Although next episode will have a squirrel clip, most of the squirrel clips I'm filming, I'm just saving for a private secret squirrel episode that will come later, and have all these magnificent clips I've gotten. All I'll say is that they definitely like the nuts, and we're getting to trying to have two goals currently. One is to get them comfortable with being on the desk here, like hopping on the desk and being comfortable here. We're building that goal. And we're also building the goal of trying to increase their diet and get them to eat some fruits, and then we'll mix in some more vegetables and etc. So, somebody asked, what about promotion when you capture, like adding 1 or 2 coins? About the game earlier, I don't think we need promotion, but maybe that could be a trait if you have regeneration. If you allowed them to have their turn can be, instead of moving, they get to regenerate a single piece on the back row. That would extra encourage capturing multiple pieces and maybe having promotion of some sort in the rules. However, I like the idea of having a fixed amount. So if anything, if you promote, I would want it to be like when you kill an amount, you get it instead of them to some degree. We would need a fixed board state for some interesting mathematical things I'm going for. But that's possible. I think right now the goal is capturing a single piece shouldn't be that powerful, because a single piece isn't that powerful. So if you capture a big stack, you don't even need promotion. If you capture something with a bigger stack than you are, even if you die, you come out ahead. So the goal is sort of, you need bigger stacks to do cool stuff, but if you lose a bigger stack to a smaller stack, then you're kind of screwed. You're coming out lower. So I don't think we need promotion necessarily. I want to encourage having a crazy path of bounces that get you a bunch of pieces in a row. And so this one's almost like a game we could call like Super Checkers or something, because we could use checkers pieces for this new variation. You know, we don't need the coins. We just need 2 colors of thing for the newer stack hoppers variation. And so if you can bounce off the opponent's piece especially, which I want to set up, but the problem with bouncing off the opponent's piece is we can't have an opening board state where all of your pieces are like lined up in the back 2 rows. Because if I got a single piece there, I would be like bounce, 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 bounce. So if we're allowed to bounce off the opponent's pieces, they have to start in a more particular state. Or that you really have to avoid them from getting into your back zone until you reclump it. But in that case, or in either case, I think that a lot of interesting things to explore anyway. Now, another way I considered that you could have your goal be that's entirely different could be you have dice per player on a certain cell that start at 1, and if they get hit by a stack, they add that amount to the die. And maybe if your stack hits a die, it like resets on your back zone or something, but it adds that amount to their die. And that you have to get all their dice to 6. Okay, a smaller squirrel is here. I'm pretty sure there's a different one, so I'll give it a nut also. Okay. Hi. Okay. Some of them are shyer than others. I love those little guys. They're so cool. Oh, they're so cool. Okay. We're going to get more random squirrel moments because, especially this week maybe, because my neighbor, the one who feeds the squirrels apart from me that I know, I don't know how many neighbors feed them, but I know of one who does, and she's out of town, so they're probably extra coming to me this week. Now, we want them to know how to hunt as well, but don't worry, we don't feed them enough to be their full diet, and they're just snacking on random fruit trees and stuff apart from that. Don't do that with squirrels in a random park or forest, because you might be messing up their diet or skills of hunting and such. These squirrels are already way too spoiled. They're just going around eating whatever junk they can find on the fruit trees and stuff. So it's okay if we're giving them a nut here and there. But we do want to, if we keep feeding them, upgrade their diet and get them comfortable with fruits. I left a few pieces of pluot over here, and the pluot pieces are gone. So at some point, they didn't eat it from my hand because they're not used to it. But at some point, they did eat the pluots that I left over there, or the pieces of it. And we're going to, at some point, make them eat vegetables too. We're going to give them a healthy diet. All right. Somebody asked, what if every turn you could flip the coin on top of a stack? That would further de-incentivize stacking too much. In the game I currently have, to keep the rules easier to amalgamate the total, you cannot flip part of a stack. You can, in many of the ways we set up the turn structure, have times to flip your coins or your opponent's coins. But we would flip the whole stack when we do that. And so flipping one on the stack, like the ability for a stack to have different orientations within it, changes a lot of how that would add pages to the rules probably. So we're saying that a stack has to be one orientation. The stack is all heads up or all tails up. That makes it easier to flip the whole thing or not too. Now, we don't need to de-incentivize stacking, because if you take a big stack, you kill that many pieces. So as long as part of the goal involves killing the opponent's pieces, stacking is already de-incentivized as much as it's incentivized, because you could, kill that amount of them. And somebody said it's like a twisted version of Othello. I actually really like the game Othello. That's a great game. We don't have the game here, but you can play it why it's a great game is partially because you can play it with something like checkers or coins. It's a simple enough game that you're able to do it like that. I happen to know that the game starts like that typically, and then you play a piece per turn, and if you have to surround one of the other color and flip it. So like now I'm going to go here and surround it and flip it. I might be not describing this perfect. I haven't played it in a while, but it's something like this. Like you like surround them and flip them. And it ends up being like weirdly I was flipping them. You have to flip them to the other color. That's what I was doing weird. Normally they have black on one side and white on the other side. So flipping them actually does something. But Othello is a cool game that's a little different than this because you play a piece per turn and you can put it anywhere. So you just like put a new piece down per turn anywhere. So I really like that game, but it's a slightly different category to analyze when we're looking at games where you put a piece anywhere per turn. I mean, not anywhere, you have limits, but where you just like land a new piece per turn versus games where you move a piece per turn. So the strategy will be very different to analyze with those, even though at heart they sound relatively similar. We also have a fan of Go in the comments. I want to study that more in the future because I have read that that's a simpler set of rules than chess, possibly, not sure, and that it is quite complicated. So we will do Go in the future, as someday I'll study that one. Now, a lot of other cool comments, including one mentioning Threvens. Yes, Threven, make sure to work that word into your vocabulary because, in fact, Threven could be important in terms of game theory as well. When can you move a Threven amount of squares? When do you have this or that? Threven. Now, I want to test out that game a bit, but I also want to make sure I fit it somewhere in the stream. Talk about a new development to my somewhat random seeming magic card theory. Now, not everyone's going to be interested in this, but I was pondering the challenge in some earlier streams that I have now made a further development on. And the challenge I'm surprised no one has looked at, which is that in the typical Magic formats, you're allowed, there are variations, but in the most common classic ones, you're allowed up to 4 of each card. And your deck must be 60 cards or more. And you can have more than 4 of a card if it's the 5 cards called Basic Land. Maybe there's more basic lands now. Waste, I don't know if that one's a basic land. But you can only have more than 4 of the card if it's a basic land. Now, you cannot make a 60-card deck that would always win on the first turn under those rules. But if we imagine the opponent as what you call a goldfish, like they're not doing anything against you during it being your first turn, you starting the game, they can't do some weird counter spell blank out of the blue. If we're playing against a goldfish opponent, you could easily design, say, a 10-card deck that no matter which 7 of those you drew, you'd win the game right away. Because there's powerful combos of cards and some cards that really overly fuel your mana advantage or card advantage or such. And so what I haven't seen asked as much is, where is the cutoff currently? What is the size of deck that would always win on the first turn? In every way of drawing the cards and the rest of the deck being ordered. And it's very hard to make a deck that does that. If you actually go thoroughly through almost any deck you try and design of, say, 10, 20 cards that you think always wins, you can find some hand of the opening 7 cards that don't do it. We need it to always work. And last time I mentioned that I'd gotten it to 21 cards and that I thought we had a chance at adding a card or two. And I have. I'm hesitant to call it proven because I went through the logic that would be in a proof, but very casually and quick in my notes. So I didn't write a formal proof of it. I went through the logical steps you would have in a proof, but a lot more casually and quick. So pretty sure that it's increased it past 99% sure that I'm sure of this, that I have a 22 card deck that no matter what arrangement of the cards against a goldfish opponent, it would always win on the first turn. Sounds pretty wild. Always on the first turn. And I'm looking up there because I see another squirrel coming. Now, I have trouble because I don't want to overfeed one squirrel too many nuts, but the neighbor said there's like 10. So then that makes me want to feed each one that comes a nut because I'm like, what if it's another one? In any case, we're going to give this one a nut. Here. Love those things. I love the squirrels. They're so cool. Okay, and later I will come through the stream and collect a few clips. The whole stream will post as a video as usual, but I'll collect a few clips as well because I am making a secret squirrel documentary, mini documentary episode or whatever that will come out like 5 episodes from now once we've achieved a few more squirrel goals. Now, looking at the magic card deck that I've invented, I do want to share, just for anybody who is into the game, I want to share what is in my 22 card deck that can always win. Even if you're not into the game, I'll mildly explain what each card does. Then I want to look at, possibly, what I've also been researching for that game is, what are the most powerful and least powerful cards in the game? Least powerful is kind of a funny question. Like, what cards are so ineffective you can hardly imagine any use for them? But most powerful, many players would say it's the card called Black Lotus. That is the most valuable card. It's the card that's the rarest. Technically a card called the One Ring sold to the musician Post Malone recently for more money than a Black Lotus has ever sold for. So by single card value, the One Ring, the version that Post Malone has, is the most expensive magic card. But in general, Black Lotus is the most expensive and the rarest. And I mean, it's equally rare as other cards, but it's treated on a higher pedestal of rare because it's among the rarest and also very valuable. Many players say it's also the best card in the game. But someday I might need to make a whole episode about going through the most powerful cards in the game and how, under different metrics, I can imagine 5 to 10 different cards I've found so far that under certain metrics would be better than Black Lotus. On a blanks, like better, not a card that fits in with one random combo, but even just like on a general big scale, cards that we could say are to the average deck better than Black Lotus under some metrics. And so there's also one card that players who are really good at Magic might be able to guess, but there are 2 cards. One is If You Allow an Old Band Mechanic, and one is Even If You Don't, that I would consider straight up better than Black Lotus. But there are metrics in which they're not. So what I wanted to look at there is showing those cards, but also going to a list of what I've been looking at to study is a list of what I call the Superbanned cards. Because you got cards that are banned in some tournament or another. So there's also ones that are restricted in some tournament or another. And real quick, somebody asked in the comments, what are Black Lotus's weaknesses? It has very few weaknesses, but one weakness we could say is that it's not as good in the late game as the early game. It's very good for fueling up your first few turns. But if you draw Black Lotus on turn 7 of a standstill and you already have a lot of lands, Black Lotus doesn't help you as much. It also is disposed, so it's not as good for certain decks that would have the need to have a medium amount of mana on many turns as opposed to a lot of mana on one turn. So it has some weaknesses. But it's still like an auto include in pretty much any deck. But there are 5 to 10 cards I could see the argument for being better than it. And in my personal analysis, there are 2 cards that are better. And if you don't allow the anti-mechanic, there's 1 card that's better. So it's not like a mechanic, but cards that have this weird old band thing. Okay, whenever I move the camera, you can expect I'm doing something similar. These squirrels are telling each other that I'm giving them nuts, and so they're all coming for the nut. So once like 5 come, I'll be out of nuts, and we won't worry about if I'm overfeeding one. I don't think I am. I think they're all different squirrels, but I don't know. See, now they're so comfortable with me, they will hang out there and open it. Let's watch it for a second, because it's so comfortable with me here that I can talk, hold this computer watching it, and it's just hanging out with me, because it knows that I'm its friend. Now, when they crack open the nut, it's interesting. Watch, they're going to throw little shards of shell to the side. They, like, chip off little shards of shell to get into the interior, and they're, like, just like spit them, toss them off to the side in a way. Let's try to get to the inside of that delicious walnut. Oh yeah, you got in there. You got that inside. Dad's a good boy. The walnuts are apparently good for their teeth. That cracking open, I read that it's actually healthy for them. Oh, I hope you folks can see this well, because this guy's a little sweetheart. I love these little squirrels. Alright, we're gonna hang out on this guy. I'm holding the camera, so it's not, although it feels like one of our intermissions, it's not, because I'm standing here holding my laptop. But we're gonna have to take a break from you for a second, mister, and you can keep eating your nut, and we'll feed you some more later. Maybe we'll actually find a way to make the intermission on this guy, because I'll run inside right now. I need to use the bathroom at some point, so I might as well do it right now while we have a cool little squirrel right there. So, let's zoom in on this little dude. I'm putting it on a weird surface, so that's why it's weird. But there you go. There's a little squirrel. You folks watch the squirrel for a second. I'll run inside for a moment. This will be our intermission. I'll be back in like 2 minutes to talk about more game theory and weird clock things. Alright, I guess the squirrel's gone, so I don't know how long the fun part of that intermission lasts. Oh, there he is. He's not gone. He got over somewhere weird. So I don't know how long the fun part of that intermission lasted, but let's talk about a little more fun game theory of different sorts. Now, this stream can only go on for at most another half hour because I do have a fun activity after this that I'll be filming. I'll tell you about that at the end of the stream. For now, let's look at, like I promised, first skimming through the 22 card deck that I believe is the first researched ever 22 card deck, following no cards banned, but still following 4 cards maximum. Technically, we're banning cards from what are called the unsets, that are joke cards, cards called conspiracy cards, and like plane chase cards and stuff that were designed for certain draft experiences and not for the main game, and banning cards like what's called Chaos Orb and stuff that are a dexterity card. This is a super weird old card. We'll look at, there are 3 cards that are like auto banned in tournaments, which are not for power levels, which are Chaos Orb. Flip Chaos Orb onto the playing area from a height of at least 1 foot. Chaos Orb must turn completely over at least once, or it is discarded with no effect. When Chaos Orb lands, any cards in play that it touches are destroyed as our Chaos Orb. So you literally were supposed to, like, do I have a playing card here to show? You're supposed to, here, yeah, this is from a weird old other trading card game. You're supposed to go, like, flip it and have it land on a card. This made players in tournaments want to spread their cards super far apart in case somebody else had a Chaos Orb, so that if it fell, it would only destroy a maximum of 1 card. So players at tournaments were spreading their cards super far apart so that a Chaos Orb couldn't kill more than 1. Made it way less fun. There's also a urban legend that could be true or not about a fella shredding his Chaos Orb, throwing it as chaos confetti that was later referenced in an unset card to destroy many cards at once. So this card is iconic, and there's also one called Falling Star that is another similar, what they call a dexterity card, where you flip it. They call it a dexterity card because it sort of leaves certain players out. What if you were handicapped or something? Magic's supposed to be a game of the minds, and so if you were handicapped in your hands, but your mind worked fine, Magic's supposed to be for you, as well as, you know, as many people as possible. But these force you to be able to flip a card really well. So they call them dexterity cards, and those 2 are the only ones they've printed that are auto-banned. And there's one more that's a reference to an old story within the Tale of Shahrazad. How am I spelling that wrong? It's something like that. How do you... What's that called? Shahrazad. What the heck is it called? There's one other one that... What's the official name for that? It's from the Tale of 1001 Arabian Nights, which they somewhat based a set on called Arabian Nights. And this is an old school tale, 1001 Nights, where this storyteller, narrated by the... Oh, whoa, it's spelled like that. Shahrazad, were told 1001 stories slowly to, like, stall this one dude or something for a war-related reason. I don't remember the details, but this, or is that really how it's spelled in this thing? No, they didn't spell it right in there either. What is the, okay, what is the thing I can do within it to know what it's in? It's like 40 cards it mentions, because they used to mention that in the draft format. Now it's drafts only use 40 cards, but they used to actually have to reference in it. No, where is it? Subgame, do they call it that? Or do they just call it like a game of Magic? It basically, this card called, wow, what is it? Okay, I'll find it. I just don't like Googling stuff while it's watching, because sometimes they're weird with these search things. Look at this. I'm like, okay, let's search something. It remembers all of these things that are not just from this site. These are things that I never searched this string of numbers on the site Scryfall. That's a magic card search. It remembers this search that they must use some generic. I'm on Firefox right now, but I've seen it do this on other things too, where this is something that I would have only searched on the OEIS, the Online Encyclopedia of Integer Sequences. And for some reason, they have saved my searches of magic cards here, as well as my searches on the OEIS. And I don't know if scrolling down's a good idea. Like, what else did they save? All right, I'm a fully honest guy with my fans, so we'll scroll down. But, they could have saved something weird. Okay, knots. I searched knots, not on the OEIS or on the magic card search. How many sites is this amalgamating my old searches from? I cleared the history since then. I have cleared the history of the browser because I don't want it to show like my zip code or whatever when I stream. But it's like, why do they remember all this? What? Okay, there's nothing. Okay, I didn't get bitten in the combo class by searching all that because nothing bad came up. But that's weird that they have all that saved. Somebody's saying a way that it might be spelled on here. Let's see if this is right for how it's spelled on here. No, that's like a more official way. So I'm going to make myself big and find it because it's like the only banned card that's like banned in every format pretty much. That's not the dexterity card or one of those weird draft cards or whatever. And it's not for power reasons. It's for making tournaments too long and confusing. And it was actually apparently the designer, Richard Garfield, was the creator of Magic the Gathering. And this guy, apparently, this was his favorite card, I read in one article. But it's banned from like every tournament because it made them too long and confusing. He had different goals for the game, the guy who created it. He wanted it to be friends trade cards. You never get too much. He didn't want to be this rich person who builds the biggest deck and wins some big tournament thing. He didn't know it would be that big. And he wanted the game to have weird little glitches that sometimes you encounter this card that does a strange thing. It turns out that they get amalgamated into this bigger game that now every card in the card pool, apart from banned or restricted cards, are allowed in certain formats, like what are called Vintage and Legacy, are the two formats that have they allow any card that they don't mention is banned or restricted. Now, this one is banned in each format because it makes the players... This is the text on the card. This is their synopsis of how it actually fits into the current Magic rules. Players play a Magic which just shortens the same thing. Players play a Magic sub-game using their libraries as their decks. Each player who doesn't win the sub-game loses half their life rounded up. So, playing a Magic sub-game, especially if you have multiple of these in your deck, and you could play a sub-game of a sub-game, made certain games in tournaments last too long, and you need them to last certain amounts of time, made them super confusing as far as how rules work, and in general, they banned this from all the tournaments instead of having to have 50 more rules about, when you exile a card from a sub-game, is it the same exile as what was exiled in the outer game, and etc. So, apart from those weird cards, what cards are banned in pretty much every format? Well, I found a way to find this on this site Scryfall here. What we can do is we can say formats. What are cards that are... Now, if we look at the cards that are... Vintage is a format that is really old, never bans any cards except for They banned like 2 in the past, Channel and Mind Twist or something like that are unbanned. So they restrict cards instead of banning, which means you only get 1 of each card. Usually you get up to 4 of them. If a card's called restricted, you can only use up to 1 of it in your deck. Now, in Vintage, they try not to ban anything and only even go up to restricted. So you can have up to 1 Black Lotus and stuff like that. But they did ban 1 other card called Luris because they seriously... Oh no, it's not going to show up because it's no longer restricted in Vintage. But this card is they printed this thing on about 10 cards called No, I don't want it restricted. Come on, get rid of this. I can't get rid of it? Seriously? Okay. This card is not inherently something that could be considered one of the best ever, except for the fact that it has this mechanic that they only put on like 10 cards called Companion that lets you, if you have a weird deck building requirement, play it from outside the game. They had to errata is the term for when you have to add additional rules text after the fact to change something. This mechanic to say that you have to pay 3 mana to play it from outside the game. Because otherwise, it's like a free 8th card in your hand. They made a mechanic that functioned like a free 8th card out of your hand. In your opening hand, it's all about your resources. And one of those that I don't see mentioned as much is randomness. You need some randomness in the game because you can't build a deck that always gets its combo in the opening hand. But this gives you a guaranteed 8th card outside your hand with the way the mechanic originally was functioned. So before they added that must pay 3 mana thing, this card was in like way too many decks, even in the formats that didn't ban any cards. So this was the only card banned in Vintage since 1996. It happened a few years ago. Then they unbanned it when they errated the mechanic. So now there are no cards banned in this format. Vintage, you can have, apart from, you cannot play Chaos Orb and Charizard, those ones, the dexterity weirdos I mentioned. In general, you could play all the normal cards, but some are restricted. So in this like super loose format that is like as many cards as they could allow, looking at the restricted list gives us a good clue of overpowered cards. Now, come on, I don't want I hate the autofill is now screwing me in like 50 different ways. It's making it hard to search stuff. Now, what I wanted is that it's restricted in Vintage, but here's the thing. So I'll show you in advance real quick. There are 50 restricted in Vintage. The other old format that allows every card except for what's banned or restricted is one that instead of restricting, they ban certain things. So there's one that doesn't have a restricted list but has a banned list. That's called Legacy. And so that has 60 cards banned, I believe, if we search it. This is all current. They change this every couple of years. It says 104, but I think it's about 60 that actually are not counting. Like Conspiracy right here. These are the cards I was saying are part of one weird format. This is an anti-related card. Some of these are ones that were what I mentioned. Oh, I forgot to mention, all the cards that mention anti. You do this betting thing back in the day. And those are all restricted and banned, or fully banned, for sure. You can't have the cards that say anti. But I figured, what if we came up with a list of the most banned cards? And the way we'll do that is we'll see the ones that are banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage. The 2 formats that have the most amount of cards available. What cards do you have none of them in the one that does that, and have only one of them in the one that does some of that? Well, there are 35 cards, and I'm going to nickname these the Superbanned cards. The cards that are so banned that they're banned in Legacy and restricted in Vintage. And they're not of that weird type that it's like, obviously they're banned. Now, but not due to power. These are the ones that are banned for power reasons, not because you flip a card in a weird way and it doesn't fit in the rules. Ones that are banned because they're too good. Now, here, if we look at one more trait, which is, let's look at, where can I put this? This will be under criteria, I guess. First printing. We want the first printing because then, if I look at the first print of each, I can sort by release date, and we actually get their release date. Not the release date of the newest print of them, but of the oldest. So, this is something I'm taking notes on that I might make an episode about, because I've been studying like a lot about what makes a card banned in a game. It might seem like we're just talking about one game, but we're talking about in general, a game that in general that has this sort of effect, which is, you know, you have hands, you have life, you have things in play that can damage the life or draw cards. How valuable are certain effects like life or cards or etc.? Well, all the banned cards have surprising traits in common. There's only, of the Superbanned cards, I said, that are not only banned in Legacy but also restricted in Vintage, only 4 of them have come out in the last 20 to 25 years. In the last since 2000, only these 4 came out. All of them are similar mistakes. Mana was too cheap to... All of these, the top line of these, are about a way you can make the cost cheaper. When you make stuff not cost enough, it's a problem in this game, because the reason Magic works so well over so many years is they balanced effects like life as a resource, cards as a resource, and mana as a resource. If you can just cheat something into play, or cheat a bunch of cards into your hand, you avoid those resources' fundamental natures. So these 4 sort of cheated certain things, but even at their best, this one is trying to be this card. I don't want to talk too much about this card in case I make a whole thing about it later, but this card is certainly one of the ones battling Black Lotus for best card ever. This card is so powerful. Now, looking at this whole list, the Superbanned cards is really interesting. Because if you first looked at the game, you'd think, what are the most powerful things? Maybe it would be something with the legendary subtype. Maybe it'd be something that is a creature with a really big power and toughness, or a creature with a cool effect. Maybe it would be something that says win the game, or that says someone loses the game, like as an effect that's hard to do but possible on the actual card. Maybe something that gains you a ton of life, or that deals a ton of damage to the opponent, or that makes one of your creatures really big. None of those are a single one of the 35 cards. There are no creatures on here. There are no multicolored things. There are no legendary things. There is nothing that deals damage to the opponent. There is nothing that gains life as its main effect. There is almost all the things that you expect would be a powerful card if you first started the game are not the 35 Superbanned cards. They're ones that cheat 2 resources. Cards. Actually, I would argue 3 resources. Cards. How many cards you've gotten so far and how many cards you have at a given point. Being able to draw is way more powerful than they realized at the beginning. Draw 3 cards. Way too powerful. I mean, I sort of just have to give a semi-spoiler that so far in my research on this, I'm of the opinion that this might be the most powerful card in the game. If you don't allow anti-cards, in which case there's another one that could be. But it is debatable whether this is better or not than Black Lotus. There are metrics in which Black Lotus is better, metrics in which this is better. But drawing 3 cards for 1 mana, way better than they thought it was back in the day. Similarly, cheating mana, getting free mana for a 0-cost thing that doesn't count as you're only allowed to play 1 land per turn, which are typically the things that give you the mana, unless you dedicate your deck to having cards you use up to give you the mana. These ones, though, are repeatable things, or just powerful blasts of things that give you the mana for nothing, just right there. And some of these cards are just way too good. They're all on this list about cheating the mana, the cards, or I would argue maybe a third effect as well, which could be the randomness. Some of these have an effect that was named after this card called Demonic Tutor, an effect they call tutoring in Magic as a nickname based on this. Search your library for a card and put it in your hand. Reshuffle your library afterwards. So it's like drawing a card, but you used a card. So a card that says draw 1, unless it costs 0, needs something else on it to be good, because otherwise you used a card to get a card. It just replaced it. So if it costs 0, it could be close to a blank card in your deck. See this one called Gitaxian Probe, which you can pay 2 life for as its only cost. But in general, if a thing costs mana and it draws 1 card, that doesn't do that much. It helps replace it, but it needs other effects. But this one, you pick the card. It could be any card from your deck. And they call it tutoring for a card named after this card in Magic to search your deck for something. And we could see that even cards that were made as worse versions of that, these ones that don't put it in your hand, but put it on top of your deck. So far worse to put it on top of your deck than put it in your hand. It's like you lose a card draw off that. Does cost 1 less, but still a worse card. These are still banned. This one too. Even a sorcery means you can play it less fast. You play it in less phases of the game. It only goes to the top of your deck. You lose 2 life, but this tutor effect is so powerful. They've even had to ban ones that just search for certain sorts of cards and put that on top of the deck. So cheating randomness is another one of these as well. This is also a strange tutor in a way, demonic consultation. And almost all the rest of these cheat mana or cheat card draw. So it's very interesting. There's a few exceptions. Balance is a little different. There's like a few exceptions on this list that do other things, but almost all of them are just about not... The card on their own cannot kill the opponent. They're about fueling your other cards that could kill the opponent far too easily. Because if you get your mana too quick, you're playing turn 4 stuff while your opponent's playing turn 2 stuff. And if you get your cards too quickly, you just have options for everything. If I can draw 3 cards, I could get a mana source and something to play with it and a third thing. So this is a quite interesting list to me that we will nickname the Superbanned list. The ones that I found that are banned in Legacy and restricted, which is the furthest current status possible if you're not a card like Chaos Orb in Vintage. And these are our list, and only 4 of them are recent, and you can look into why these were. 2 were from the same set. They're banned because Phyrexian mana as the only cost is too powerful. It makes it a free spell. Free spells are another thing you'll notice on here. If a card has a way of playing it or other stuff for free, overpowered. These 2 are because of the delve mechanic. Made it surprisingly easy to delete the number part of this cost and just have this cost 1 blue and this cost 2 blue. At the same time, this, at its best, is still not as good. You can come up with situations where any card is the best card for you because it's such a complex game. You cannot actually say one thing is strictly better than another, but you can, under pretty much any circumstance, this is trying to be, at its best, an almost as good version of Ancestral Recall. They try and fix these cards, and sometimes they're still banned. Black Lotus taps and sacrifices to add 3 mana of any color for 0. And they made one called Lotus Petal that costs 0 and add 1 mana. 1/3 as much effect as this, still banned in several formats, although not on our Superbanned list. They make Ancestral Recall knockoffs that you can only play like Ancestral Recall by making it a sorcery and by delving 7 cards from your graveyard. Still banned. This shows how good a few of these cards are. When I applied all of my metrics to these cards, there are really, if you don't allow, well, there's many metrics. I can imagine 5 or 10 cards that could be Black Lotus level. So maybe I'll have to make an episode about that sometime, about the 5 to 10 cards that I think you could argue under certain metrics are as good as Black Lotus. And the only spoiler I'll give you so far is yes, Ancestral Recall will be on there. However, Ancestral Recall and Black Lotus are part of what are called the Power 9. Some super valuable, rare set of cards from Magic's history. But all the other cards, I'm going to say, that are as good as Black Lotus under other metrics are not the Power 9. The only 2 from the Power 9 that I'm going to say are on each other's tier are Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall. And okay, fine, I'll give the spoiler alert of one part of it, which is that I think Ancestral Recall is better. I think this is a better card than Black Lotus. But it does depend on the metric. For example, you need that to be in a blue deck. Is our metric that we want it to fit in any deck? Or that we can choose the deck based on the overpowered card? So, you know, we'll go into that someday. We're either going to have 1 long episode or even 2 medium episodes sometime when we go into the best cards of the game ever and the worst cards of the game ever. Because the worst cards of the game ever is kind of funny, too. All right. So, these are random important cards. Since I mentioned I'd do it, I forgot to do this part. For anybody who wants to know about my challenge, about the 22 cards that might be able to beat any deck. Of course, we're assuming they have no turn 0 counterspell effects. And we're assuming we have to make it mathematically one thing to do any research. So we're saying you go first and they don't have any turn 0 counterspell effects. And you have to win on your first turn. Or we'll say if you get extra turn effects like Time Walk or whatever, you have to win before their first upkeep. Or, okay, we can say you have to win if you mill out their whole deck so they die on their draw. You have to win before their first main phase. That'll be our challenge. You have to win before they get a main phase. Well, mine doesn't require that. But mine does require you're allowed to use a sideboard, which is allowed in pretty much every tournament, or that you're using casual terms for these, in which case your sideboard, if a card calls for outside the game, is anything you own. So, my deck, real quick, 4 Black Lotus. So, we have 4 Black Lotus in the deck. We also have 2 of one called Lotus Petal. 2 Lotus Petals. And we have 1 of a card called Wish. I had 3 of these in my last deck structure because when I built a 21 card deck, we have to make sure if we have draw effects, we can't overdraw our deck or we lose the game. And we can't have our best card trapped at the bottom. So the way I got around that last time was by having multiple wishes, 3 of these, so that even if I drew too much or too little, or if I wouldn't draw too much, but if the only way of drawing would have been too much, I would have still had some wish somewhere I could get. However, now I've found this new deck I had to really carefully calibrate so that it can draw every card in the deck if it needs. I'm pretty sure that under any circumstance, if it needed to, this deck, you know, if it's not one of the ones where it just has to win right away, which are a few of them, it just wins right away, it can draw every card in the deck while winning. Now, so I only have 1 of those in my new deck. Then I have 4 Ancestral Recalls. Yes, this card is, you know how we're talking about the most powerful cards, fits into my challenge. My challenge is proving certain things about it, like how the only cards that I was guaranteed to want all of, if possible, were Black Lotus and Ancestral Recall. However, in this mini deck challenge, we have to be careful, because drawing 3 cards You can't overdraw. We don't want to, you know, what if I have 2 cards left in the deck and one of them's a wish? And this says draw 3 cards. What do I do? Well, there's ways to get beyond that and make it work. And the ways that I'm pretty sure worked with this deck, I'm pretty sure I proved it not positive. But I ran through a proof in my head of the steps that would be in the proof, and with a few notes. Is 4 Ancestral Recalls, 1 copy of what's called Conjurer's Bauble. We have 1 of these, and then that so far adds up to 12 cards. Then we're going to have some almost free cards as long as we have enough life. 4 Gitaxian Probes and 4 Street Wraiths. These are like free cycling cards. In a way, if we can lose all life. Then we have 2 of a card called Seagate Reborn / Restoration. However, the squirrel's right here. So I need to make my camera big and pan it to the squirrel that is literally right there. Do I even have any more nuts? I don't even know if I have any more nuts, dude. I haven't feeded either you or all your friends. I need to get a nut for you. So do I not? I don't even think I have any more nuts. This squirrel really... Okay. I'm going to run and grab it a nut. I'll be back in 1 second. I'm going to get you a nut. You still here? Where are you at, squirrel? Oh, it's on the ground down here. Come up here. You gotta come up. It wants it on the ground. Come here. All right. Now, okay. So, I have to pause whenever the squirrels come. Sorry, they're very important and cool. Now, the last thing in this deck I was talking about is Seagate Restoration / Reborn. This is a double-faced card, if we allow this. My last deck idea used a different card called Fiery Islet instead. This, if we use this double-faced card, I believe, which is allowed in the tournament still, I believe we can use 2 of them, and the deck will work, and be 22 cards. That always wins on the first turn and beats any previous record of anything previously studied about that. I also think there's a chance that if you reorganize the other cards in the deck a bit, you're going to have to change them, insert new ones, modify them. You got to change your draw spells for this to work, change your mana, maybe. Might need to throw in some mana crypts, might need to change some of the ancestral recalls to X spells or things like, there's one called Meditate works well for this challenge or stuff like that. Or more Conjurer's Baubles or ones called Chromatic Sphere or there's a lot of ways we might have to edit it if you try getting 2 Seagate Reborn / Restorations and a Fiery Islet. for now, I've proven that with that decklet, proven meaning I've gone through some steps of proof, not 100% sure, but more than 99, so I'll look deeper into it later before I make an episode. But that previous deck list I showed plus 2 sea gates here will win the challenge. Now, if you can get 2 sea gates and a fiery islet while still having those 8 free cards, 6 mana resources, and 6 mana using draw spells / win conditions, and make sure it still beats my challenge, you could maybe get to 23 cards and even beat me. So comment if anyone for some reason wants to double check that or beat the record. Now, somebody said, how long have I been feeding them for them to eat out of my hand? Now, it's been a little while. There was, the previous generation was more shy, so they would just run through the background in what we called grade -1 here. Now that we're in grade -2, the new generation of grade -2 is nice squirrels. And one of the neighbors said she named the mom squirrel, who used to visit her, an older one, Harriet. And that she said Harriet had about 10 children. And so there's all these little ones, apparently, who are now the teenage ones, the smallerish ones we see come by. And they're very friendly and very nice. And between me and the neighbor, we've gotten comfortable with them. It did take several times for them to eat out of my hand, but we have gotten there. So I love those little fellas. And you know what I got for them? Technically, my neighbor got this for me. You all think that my neighbors hate me because of all the noise I make and the bubbles and all that stuff. I make alliances with my neighbors. Me and my neighbors are usually cool. The neighbor who also feeds the squirrels, you know what she got me? A little picnic table for the squirrels. This is for the squirrels. This is for when I get them more comfortable with being lured on the desk. They can eat a nut off this on the side of the thing while I'm teaching. It's a little picnic table for them. That's so cute and cool. So, yeah, you got to have alliances with your neighbors. You think that I bother everybody, but, I've unburnt all my bridges. People like me, even though I'm a Chaos Lord. Chaotic good for the win. Now, going forward, I am going to have to wrap up this stream soon, but I'll tell you the reasons. The reasons are because I'm going to be filming... Oh, no! Chessboard falling. Going to be filming with my main camera guy, Carlo, which this is, I think, the first time I've hired him to come over at night, because normally we've gotten some cool nighttime shots where you see shadows and things in a strange way. Shadows and reflections and light and stuff can do cool things. And the minimalism of when darkness cuts out part of the scene and certain things get more illuminated by a light from a candle or lantern or whatever. It's very interesting. You can get a lot of cool minimalism and surrealism and interesting shots at night. There's also something construction-wise happening across the street right here. Definitely doesn't have anything to do with that cone back there. Definitely this cone right there. That's definitely unrelated to any construction happening across the street. But they're doing this construction in various ways. Some of it is like building new pipes for the street, and some of the rest of it is across the street, they're rebuilding this house. That used to be an abandoned house that all these cats lived in, and I think that my third stray cat, Sassafras, came from that house originally, before he came over and got adopted and became a little lovelord. Now, they're doing construction, which has made it really hard to film in the daytime. They're so loud sometimes. But there's some interesting zones out there right now that I kind of want to film at. So, we're going to get some weird shots tonight. Carlo's going to come over pretty soon. He may even already be here. He sometimes hangs out with my brother if he gets here early when I'm still busy. But I should wrap up and get ready for that. We're going to film some stuff. So I know I put Roman numerals in the title, but I'm going to have to do, another one. Another one. DJ Khaled style, but like squirrels. Come on. How many squirrels have we got here? This is the last one we'll feed on the stream. Hi, mister. So, thank you all for joining me. I know I put Roman numerals in the title, but you're going to have to wait for an episode coming out in a couple days, probably 2 days from now or so, on the Combo Class channel that will be about restructuring the clocks. This is even a spoiler. About restructuring the clocks. And this will be a fun new version of our clock quest. Take it even further. And some of the shots will be filmed at night using some interesting shadows and such. And that night is tonight. And it's going to be dark in an hour or two, so it's time for me to get ready. So, I'll see you all next time. Hope you all enjoyed some random game theory and stuff. And I love you all. Really cool that anyone likes watching me and joining me on this journey and trusting me when I say the coolest stuff in Combo Class is yet to come. And I will see you all in another one soon. I'm also going to be posting a bunch of shorts throughout this week. I said that this last week, but it's actually going to happen this week. That's going to start with the ones moved from my Combo Class channel. So super fans may see a few of them that they've already seen before. Then it's going to go into brand new ones in a few days, including first some ones about random nature things and then back to some math. So, love you all. Catch you in that extra content. Make sure to tune into the Combo Class channel for not only the episode in a few days, but that you've seen the one linked in the description. That was our latest episode about infinities in board games. In card games. And in BlackBerry patches and prime numbers and more. I'll see you in the next one. And thank you for watching.